Really objective, and we're going to be talking about what took place in the American midterm elections, which I assume everybody around the world pays close attention to. Normally, midterms are not as sexy as presidential elections, but in this case, a lot was on the line for a lot of people, specifically with abortion still being fresh on people's minds, also Donald Trump or his ghost still being on people's mind, and other things as well. We're going to talk about this. Let's meet some of the co-hosts today. We've got a guy, he reads 35 books a day. Please welcome Nikos Rucka.
Hi, everyone.
And we've got a guy who will someday play, well, hopefully not John Fetterman, but I'm sure he could do the task. It's Mark Pellegrino.
Hey, what's up, Rucka?
I don't even know if Fetterman's first name is John, but I think it is. Anyway, yeah, so listen, let me say this. This show was it first was born during a very sad time. You know, the BLM violence was taking place, if I recall. That was like my first episode. Like, it was lockdowns were in full effect. I was in LA. Very sad and disheartening time. I'll just say this on a personal note. The results of this midterm election has lifted my spirit in a way that no political events have done really ever. So what makes me optimistic is three things. It turns out a lot of everyday normal people, kind of a silent majority, if you will, and sometimes not so silent, but drowned out. They're for abortion rights. They really wish Trump would disappear already or just not return in the form of other candidates. And point number 3 is conservatives it's finally dawning on them. Like, they're finally starting to realize the average Joe out there, yes, like I said, wants abortion rights and does not want Trump. And it's not just the left. It's not just, the far left, extremist, communist, feminists that hate Trump. It truly is just the folks next door that wish Trump would have effed off already. That's my reading of the situation. Have either of you paid much attention to the political events of recent?
I've paid a lot of attention, but I haven't got many conclusions to draw, because here's how I see it. So the Republicans expected a huge victory because the left was so bad. So last spring, in one of my tours with Yaron, we're talking with a very insider of the conservative movement, and he predicted a historically unprecedented destruction of the left in these elections. Not a victory for conservatives, a destruction for the left, because the idea was there's a president who is so bad, the economy is really bad, based on some economic choices that the left has done. For example, not going full in with fracking or committing self-harm in terms of our energy policy. So everything was ripe for a destruction of the left. But this is not enough for the conservatives, because if you are really, really bad, just saying that the left is worse apparently doesn't work. And the second major prediction he made was that it's already clear and obvious that the person who is going to win the primaries for the Republican Party in 2 years is going to be DeSantis. So in that way, we didn't really become wiser yesterday. We saw that the conservatives whose only line of attack is that the left is horrible didn't do particularly well, and the person who everyone expects that will lead the Conservative Party in 2 years did very, very, very well. Although I have serious objections about DeSantis, we can discuss it a bit later. I'm not 100% sure, though, why this is a huge defeat for Trump. Trump indeed looks less and less relevant, but why is it a defeat for Trump and not for the Republican Party in general? So for our European viewers, the way the elections and the party system works in the United States, the president, or even more the former president, is not the party leader. So it's not like the UK, where you have, for example, Rishi Sunak, and if the party does well, it's on him. So you could say that these bad elections are more on Mitch McConnell rather than they are on Trump. So I would want you to explain to me, the outsider, why it is viewed by so many as a defeat for Trump. So well, I have more questions rather than answers in my
It is a defeat for Republicans in general, but Republicans are suffering the consequence of, of going with Trump the way they did. And I mean, a lot of them had no choice at a certain point, right? They resisted him, but at a certain point, they kind of had to get behind him. But nonetheless, that's a big reason that Republicans are being punished. So I don't understand the dichotomy.
Well, look, yeah, I mean, I think Trump takes all the oxygen out of any room that he's in. He just sucks it right out, and he has more or less been the standard bearer of the Republican Party, like it or not. Even though 60% of the people in the GOP want him gone. I mean, this was a stat that was just talked about, a couple of weeks before the election. I think the election bore out that fact that the GOP, we are seeing the political birth, the presidential birth of Ron DeSantis for sure, because he kicked butt in Florida, and Trump was more or less irrelevant. I mean, a few of his candidates got in, a lot of them got turned down. Some of the ballots had abortion rights on the ballot at the same time that these candidates were out there, and people voted overwhelmingly, well, not necessarily overwhelmingly, but to a larger degree for abortion rights over the nationalist populist agenda. And more importantly, it's getting the intellectuals and pundits on the right talking. So right now they're all saying perhaps Trump has to dump the nationalist populist agenda, stop talking about election results, dump all that. It's done. People are done with it. And if he wants to be relevant in 2024, embrace this other thing, become more like DeSantis, which I think is impossible for the man. So I think there's going to be a potential interesting split. I don't think Donald Trump is going to want to go away in 2024. He's too much of a malignant narcissist. I feel like there's going to be a challenge, and that the GOP is going to have to choose between DeSantis and Trump. I think they will choose DeSantis over Trump, and Trump may do a bull moose. He may pull a Theodore Roosevelt, another malignant narcissist in history, and do a third party run. I keep thinking that might happen, in his attempt to spoil the Republicans because they rejected him. He'll take out his daddy issues on the Republicans. So I think right now the Republicans are doing what they need to do. They're introspecting. They're actually figuring out what went wrong. Why didn't this red wave happen when 75% of the country hates the direction that it's going in? So that was the reason for the predictions. And I think Rucka is accurate in saying that people chose these moral issues that are very important, I think fundamental rights issues, over some of these superficial demagogic things like populism that the Republicans have been leaning towards over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. So I know we're all exposed to different voices and different media personalities. So what I've seen from conservatives is not that they're saying Trump should change his tune. They're basically saying we lost because of Trump. We didn't get the red wave because of Trump. Time to just finally put Trump behind us. And that's a move. And that's a move that should have happened 2 years ago when the 2020 election took place. But at that time, Daddy Trump, the figurehead of QAnon, who was president, just announced that, they're stealing the election, and a bunch of people went with it. And this time around, I was kind of bracing myself to see that again. And during election day, during the daytime, you see Michael Knowles and all of these hacky charlatans of the right already saying, "Oh, look, they're stealing the election. Oh, wow, a machine broke in Arizona. Oh, they're stealing the election." But it just doesn't stick the same way. It doesn't stick without Trump, the ghost whisperer, the prophet, the man whose mental ejaculations are the voice of God, according to some of these people. So when he's not there, it's much harder to get a bunch of people to get on board with the stolen election narrative. And then they just have to live with the results of the election. And to my delight, I saw from Ben Shapiro to much more populist nationalist types all saying this means Trump is the problem and it's time to move on. And of course, the implication is that DeSantis is the next guy to take his place. But one thing I actually said earlier that I didn't mean to say is conservatives are realizing that abortion is important to people. No, I haven't seen anyone actually admit that they lost because of abortion, because they lost because the average person wants to protect abortion rights. That I don't think they're going to accept for a long time.
Well, no, I think I have heard some pundits talk about that, putting that on the back burner. I've had heard them talking about what a mistake it was for Lindsey Graham to come out and claim that they should make a national ban on abortion. I mean, that was the most wrong-headed move anybody could have made. I think right before a midterm, which Lindsey Graham, I think they resent. They don't want that to be the leading platform element going forward. At least some of the pundits that I've seen see that it's a mistake.
So wait a minute then. Was the problem Trump or Trump
Yes.
in the ideas? Because my question is, how is exactly DeSantis, his triumph, a message that we need to get rid of Trump? So DeSantis is someone who is a culture warrior, and DeSantis is someone who was the opening speaker in the last National Conservative Conference. So DeSantis is a more ideological expression of the bad things with Trump, minus the unpredictable personality. But if we have at the head of the Republican Party someone who is friendly to national conservatives, and if you have any doubts about how bad national conservatives are, go watch the episode we did with Elan Zurno, going through their program and going through their details. Yaron
That ARI did.
Yes, sorry, I did this with ARI, not with ARCUK. Yaron Brook also did something on national conservatives. So I actually went and read what they wrote. I read the latest book by Yoram Hazony, and I don't consider them much of an improvement from Trump. They're going to speak the language that is going to sound good to Washington, D.C. type of conservatives, but I don't consider them a major improvement from Trump. This is why I still don't understand why this was a defeat of Trump and not a defeat of...
But it's partly because I think the president's role is as a statesman, right? And somebody like a DeSantis, a Harvard graduate lawyer, comes off as a statesman. Now I'm not going to vote for him, full disclosure, because I do think he has a totalitarian spirit in the other direction. He's not all that different from any other nationalist conservative that we see out there. It's just that he presents his ideas in a form that is presidential. Yeah. And he also makes it about governance, leadership, the state, as opposed to a personal vendetta against people, which I think anybody should find to be very unstatesmanlike. And I think people are really bored with that fight, right? And they think he's going to rise above that fight. And I believe they're right in that respect.
And you mentioned DeSantis having this authoritarian inclination. I will just mention one thing from his victory speech the other day. He talked about how we fought woke at the universities, we fought woke in the city councils, in the schools. All this is great. But he also says, we fight woke in the corporations. Wait a minute. Why would we have any say on what woke does within the corporations? If a corporation wants to have a workshop where they take you and, like the Clockwork Orange, they put things in your eyes where you have to watch woke propaganda for 8 hours, it's the right to do so. And of course, it's the right of the employer to decline doing this. But this idea that big tech is part of what we are against, and now that I will be in power, you will see what will happen to you. I don't like this at all, and I don't consider it much of an improvement compared to where the party is at the moment.
You're right, but it has a superficial plausibility because big tech, it was shown that big tech was colluding with government, and they essentially became an arm of the government, censoring information that the government thought was appropriate, allowing that information to get through while censoring stuff the government claimed was not appropriate. So it's a really, really tough line. I mean, he's not clear on property rights. That's definitely, I think, goes without question. And he, if he improved on that, he would be a votable candidate. But it's difficult to claim that they're an entirely private company when they're colluding with government and doing the government's bidding. So they're essentially stealth censorers. I don't think that it could be called censorship when a private company is just simply enforcing its own communication policies. It's censorship when the government is inside to some way has some influence over that. Right.
Yeah, so, but except that DeSantis was not talking only about that. He was talking about woke workshops in other corporations. So first of all, I don't agree with the idea that says that because the government is strong arming the big tech, then we can discuss limitations on big tech, which I see quite often people saying on Twitter. But also, DeSantis will not stop at big tech. He will see the big corporations as something that the government has a way to manipulate towards the greater good. And again, this is the main line of national conservatives, that freedom is good as long as it doesn't go against the public good, and go figure what the public good is. That capitalism is good as long as it doesn't go against tradition or things like that. Actually, Hazoni mentioned in his book that he's in favor of banning pornography. Now, DeSantis might disagree with this, but then why do you go to their conference and give the opening statement? This makes me very, very, very suspicious. So in some ways, I would say that this might be a more dangerous turn compared to someone who is a loose cannon like Trump, and no one takes him seriously. But anyway,
I disagree. Well, I agree with Nikos generally with the laissez-faire approach to big tech, and I know Mark, we agree as well. But maybe you see the government as having more of an active role. In any case, no. Okay. So I misunderstand.
Yeah. I'm saying I understand I see where he's coming from and why that has mass appeal to people. But I think the solution is privatization. The solution to the woke takeover of academia is privatization, withdrawing funds from federal funds from universities like that. That's fine, because it's, kicking them out on their asses and letting the market decide. The same thing with schools, privatization, leaving people alone and letting the competition, sort out what's right or wrong. He would get my vote if he could say something like that, but he won't.
Yeah, so I agree. We agree privatization and property rights and capitalism is the solution. Now, so I hate nationalist conservatives, Christian nationalists, whatever Republicans or conservatives have been morphing into. I hate. I don't want them to win. If I vote, I'll vote against them. That being said, Trump got us into this. My Trump derangement syndrome has intensified and continues to intensify. And so the source of my happiness, the light at the end of the tunnel for me, is that the average Joe out there is not eating up the trash coming out of the Daily Wire that tells them, oh, it's just the left that hates Trump. No, the average person hates Trump. Now, so why do I see Trump as the biggest problem? Because he opened the door for these authoritarians. And also, even before that, Trump's complete detachment from reality makes him accountable to no one. And that to me is just like impossible to deal with, and it encourages just the lowest elements of society to have more influence. And we see that in recent years. So yeah, I think so. Someone like DeSantis, and yeah, he's way too cozy with authoritarianism. So someone like him is going to be tamed when he sees the polls, when he sees election results. He's tamed and needs to moderate, and ultimately we could see Republicans move away from where they've been going. But I don't think the solution is now to have Trump stay in power or stay president, stay the Republican figurehead because he's better than the nationalists. No, the solution is get Trump in the rear view as soon as possible, and then vote against whatever Republicans are doing. These people, Republicans, it's like they trashed the house when you left for the weekend. They should be grounded for a long time until they've learned their lesson. That's how I see it.
I get where Nikos is coming from, man. A subtle beast is a lot more scary in a way than a bull in a china shop, right? I mean, you sort of know where Trump is at, even though he's unpredictable. You see it coming like a telegraphed punch. somebody like DeSantis could do things a lot more subtly, the way Obama in some respects did, and that sort of insidiously creeps into the culture in a way that you don't even know it's happening. That's pretty freaky. So
there's a lot of freakiness. Listen, we've had some bad presidents. We've had some horrifying presidents and horrifying politicians and movements. And I'm saying, from my perspective, I've come to despise what Trump is and does, because he is just such a whimsical, free-floating authoritarian who just says whatever passes through his head and the audience eats it up. And that is not somebody we can even reason with. So yeah, that guy needs to be gone in order for the adults to try and clean up the mess. And that's where I stand.
So here's a suggestion I'm making. Next time we meet each other, the three of us, because I feel bad today for not having my usual many pages of prep, I'm going to watch the whole 1 hour talk of DeSantis in National Conservatives Conference, and we'll try to create an intellectual portrait of DeSantis. Who is really DeSantis? Because it's usually in these long form interviews or talks that to the road audience that you understand what are the ideas that someone holds. So let's try to find some long form interviews or talks by DeSantis and try to understand what he's about. Because again, it's not a secret, he's going to be probably the 2024 candidate for the Republican Party. There's no one else who is interesting enough, charismatic enough, culture warrior, but not completely crazy. So he has this good balance. He's electable, but also he ticks the boxes that throw red meat to.
Well, so that means you think that there's going to, let's say Trump declares. Do you think that means that there's a standoff between the two of them in the primary? Because I'll tell you, somebody said something recently on one of the conservative news stations that nobody wants to get in a fight with Trump. And having been in the ring with guys that are really sloppy and have no technique, you always get hurt. You get hurt by the flying elbow, the headbutt, and you never look good getting beat up in that way. And I could see DeSantis, maybe pushing his options to 2028. And I think if there's a standoff and the Republican Party goes for DeSantis, I think Trump goes third party. He's deluded. He's power hungry. He just wants to win, and he hates people who hate him. So he hates us.
Yeah, look, let me say I don't have an optimistic view of the Republican success rate moving forward. This is not where it ends. Trump, he is like Chucky, Chucky the doll. You kill him, and nobody should kill Trump, by the way. Nobody should do anything violent to anyone political. Metaphorically, though, Chucky the doll is killed and he comes back. And that's just like with the other literary metaphor, I forget. Thade in the Tim Burton, the underrated Planet of the Apes remake from 2001. The monkey, he thought he left him behind on the one planet, and then he gets back to Earth, and Thade is like he's in the Lincoln Monument. Anyway, Trump is now going to attack DeSantis. It's not inconceivable that Trump is still going to be the nominee, just because, remember, the first time Trump ran, the whole conservative Republican establishment, virtually all of them didn't want him. They tried to resist him. Ultimately, he was like a bulldozer. They couldn't stop. But eventually, he was the nominee. And then by some act of God, so to speak, he beat, he was up against Hillary Clinton, the most despised person almost in America. So he ends up being president. It was so unlikely to happen, but it ended up happening. So it's not inconceivable. But one thing is for sure, that Trump is not going to go away quietly. So
he's already labeled DeSantis. He's already called him a name because DeSantis endorsed the candidate that Trump didn't. And so he's already starting down that, schoolyard bully road again.
He's become a bit tiring. It's been 9 years since he came in as something fresh. Now everyone knows him. They know there's no essence in him. He was president for 4 years. What did he do? I'm speaking from the point of view of a Republican. He didn't do that much. At some point, he had the political capital to do big things. He didn't do them. So it's a bit like this tiring guy that, okay, we've had enough, now go. So I would put serious money in a bet that he's not gonna win the nomination. And even if he went as an independent, he will do like most independents do, which is something negligible, because partisanship and the idea that the worst leftist government ever needs to go. So that's going to be the rallying cry of Republicans. So I'm putting serious money that Trump doesn't win the nomination.
Could be right. Now,
go ahead. It could be. It also could be that if the Congress shifts to a conservative, that redounds well to the executive, as it did under Clinton. Now, Biden seems to be feeling his oats after this, red tide instead of tsunami, and he's claiming he's not changing anything that he's going to do going forward. The good news is that perhaps that will be stifled at the legislative level. Less harm is done, and people see Biden as maybe the solution, right? As sometimes I do, where I see a Democratic president and a Congress, and they're a split party, and it actually works out better for the American people. So,
yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. So we can read some super chats. Robert's been a member for 7 months. He says election 2022. It could have been worse. Yeah, could have, but I'm pretty, considering what could have happened. I'm pretty happy with the results so far. Ali with $5 says, at least y'all don't have another month to deal with elections. I got to suffer through more Warnock and Walker ads because they got to do a runoff. Yeah, they're going to be running again, and there's going to be another election day in Georgia between Herschel Walker and his opponent, because neither one has 50%. Oh yeah, I remembered what I was going to say. What I've seen from conservatives, including conservatives who were birthed by Trump, someone like Candace Owens, she emerged. She came of age in the Trump era. She's throwing Trump under the bus. She released a couple videos saying like, why Trump, disappointed me, or like they got into a fight because Trump said, yes, the vaccine, people who get vaccinated are not going to the hospital. And then, of course, that's going to upset a lot of his type of Republicans, and Candace Owens then like runs to his defense and tells her audience like, well, I think Trump is just a little out of touch because he's old, so he just watches TV news and doesn't go on Rumble like we do to get our news. So then word got to Trump that she was kind of downplaying his knowledge and intelligence because calling him old. So he like got mad at her and was rude to her the next time they hung out. It's just. But it's like high school. Yes, it is. And the important thing is here that Candace kept it to herself until the day after the election. And then once everyone started openly saying, yeah, Trump is the problem, we need to get rid of Trump, then suddenly Candace is saying, yeah, Trump has not always been kind to me, and I kind of lost some respect for him. So, yeah, I think virtually everyone today is ready to move on from Trump. But this guy does not go away quietly. So if he does run as a third party, he could play spoiler. He could end up costing the Republicans.
I think he could. He has a much bigger following than Ross Perot did, who was the last independent to actually make a splash. I mean, he'll get, I think, what did Ross Perot get? 18% of the vote. I think a guy like Trump could get a lot more than that.
And as opposed to Perot, it's going to be only from one side. So if we're talking about this type of numbers, he'll probably cost them the election. But so do you think he would only do it for vindication? He knows he wouldn't have any chance to win. So he would only do it to spoil the chances of the Republicans.
Yes. He seems like that kind of guy.
Or he thinks he could win. God knows what.
No, I think he probably thinks that too. But I think it would be motivated by vindictiveness, because he's got a little tiny soul.
And then I forgot my thought again. I'm too excited. All right, Nathan sent $10 and said, thank you, ARCUK. No, thank you. Nikos, what was the last point you made that got me
the last point I made was,
would he do it out of vindictiveness?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Would he just do it out of vindictiveness?
Mm-hmm. Robert with $5 says Trump dropping nationalism and populism is as unlikely as him adopting a dignified presidential demeanor was in 2016.
Agreed.
Like, he's unlikely to, And
it's too simple. It's a bromide. He likes it. He can wrap his head around that stuff. He could use it to beat up, the opposition. It's too easy a tool.
And let's
I
remember one thing. We constantly overestimate Trump. Remember how in 2016, the story was that he would destroy Hillary in the debates. Well, he came up as the stronger in the debates, but Hillary. Now the discussion was that in 2020, he would completely destroy Biden in the debates. It didn't happen. And actually in the first debate, he was unbearable to listen. So he's a bit like the Russian army. We think he's way stronger than he actually is because he has created this image.
I remembered another thing that escaped me a moment ago. You know how like there's this popular narrative, which maybe you guys hold as well, which I guess I sort of did for a while, but I recently changed. There's this narrative that like, oh, Trump, you know, he's the first Republican to finally punch at the media and to tell the media to stop with. And that's just not true. You look back at any Republican primary debate, at least since I've been paying attention, at least since like the Obama years or whenever, from Ted Cruz to Newt Gingrich to the fat guy from New Jersey, Chris Christie, every one of them, there was always a moment where they get a question from the journalist and they fire back going, stop, you know, with this vilification of Republicans, you media, you're all on the left.
Let's not forget that John Adams, the second president of the United States, endorsed the Alien Sedition Act, which put away a lot of newspaper men who vilified, quote unquote, the government. So this has been a problem from the very beginning. I mean, there's been a confrontation between the political powers and the media since the beginning of the Republic.
Right. So whether or not it's a problem, like whether it's a good thing or a bad thing that Republicans do this, they've done this long before Trump entered this picture. What separates Trump is the pure
stupidity.
Yes, but also like his imperviousness to like outside forces, you know, like he is not beholden to reality or anything. So like, how do you beat this guy? Right. Like he doesn't know you're like he's wrong or just doesn't care. And the audience is running with it. So, I mean, he's like impossible to it's impossible to get any insecurity out of him. And I think people really gravitated to that for some really bad reason. It was very misguided of people. And some people are still sticking by him to this day.
I think he shows his insecurity every day in confrontations with the likes of Candace Owen, for example. He's very easily wounded, but he has the narcissistic response to being wounded, which is to lash out, attack, and project.
Yes, in that respect, he shows a lot of insecurity because a confident man would not behave like he does in so many ways. But in a certain respect, he'll never tell the media like, okay, you're right, I was wrong to say that. He never shows that. Although word got out recently that after the January 6th antics, he was on a call with Mike Pence, and he said to Mike Pence at one point, wait, so if we would have not had, imagine if we didn't have the rally that day, this all could have been avoided. Like it was like a moment there, like in a private call. This was like according to Mike Pence, this was like a moment, like a day or two after all of that chaos. Trump like had a moment where he was just like, wait, so what if we didn't have a rally that day? Like, none of this would have happened.
Honestly, you also know what's exhausting to me is hearing the Republicans salivating over the fact that if they got these massive majorities, they were going to start counter investigations. To me, that's just so ugly and distasteful. It just smacks of two parties trying to get one up on each other. It doesn't smack of justice to me. It doesn't sound like the government's working for us in the sense that they're protecting our rights. They're just trying to kill each other and get one up on each other. Did that exhaust you guys at all, hearing that there would be a whole round of investigations?
It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
It's clear that nothing would come out of them. So this is just you are actually trying to appease the very bottom of your basis. But you have these people anyway, so who cares? These are not the people who are going to give you the elections. And again, as you said, with the sanctions, we probably avoid these pitfalls, going to avoid these traps. But I promise that next time we're going to have a discussion on the sanctions. I'm going to be properly prepared to see what is the ideology of this guy and whether he's an improvement on Trump, which I decline to say in advance that, yes, he's an improvement on Trump. We'll see.
Look, I hate to be the guy who's motivated by something negative because that's not a winning strategy. But with Trump, virtually anyone in today's landscape, maybe with the exception of Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is like Trump minus any semblance of dignity. There's nobody. Well, but like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like I don't know. It's like I feel like she's on the face of it just so silly. But maybe obviously comparing her to Trump, that's not saying much. Trump needs to go because of epistemology, because he's the guy who says what passes through his or halfway passes through his half-baked brain, and the crowd runs with it. And the fact that he's been out of sight is why this election came and went without, mass belief that the whole thing was stolen. Even though conservatives tried, they still do that. I just saw Mike Huckabee this morning tweeting, I thought only dead Democrats vote. Just some stupid boomer joke, excuse my language, about how, Democrat. And I'll say this to Michael Knowles, to everyone, to Huckabee, and to everyone on the right. Yes, keep on pushing this and see where it takes you. See how the public responds to your constant repetition that, the Democrats steal elections. And see how did that work out with the primaries? The midterms. Any Republican running, virtually any, maybe not all, but like out of 10 of them, or out of a certain amount of Republicans that are open election deniers, like 80% of them or 90% of them lost. So along with people rejecting Trump, they're tired of hearing this, that we can't trust election results. People, the average person is over it. They just don't want to hear about that. And they don't want the type of chaos that came with the last election, denial incident. Marilyn with $4. Thank you for that. Marilyn with $5 says, not endorsing DeSantis, but is there a politician that doesn't endorse a version of the general welfare?
No, you're right.
No,
right.
That's it. There is. That's it. Yeah, they're all the same.
There used to be like libertarian candidates who brought all types of problems with them, but at this point, I mean, so much of the libertarian party and the group have just become, basically Trump.
I think I think they are the worst. So I never expected that I would say that. I think the Libertarian Party, as it has become since its takeover by the Mrs. Caucus, is the worst political option that one could actually have, because they're consciously amoral and immoral. Not only, so they used to be amoral, now they're consciously immoral. They're seat posting, they are the useful idiots, and actually not even useful idiots, consciously idiots in terms of supporting the narrative of tyrants. They're telling you that your government is more dangerous than China and Russia, which is a truism in the way that, yeah, sure, okay, Putin is not going to tax you, but this again shows a complete disdain for morality. The fact that Putin is doing monstrosities, or the Chinese autocrats are doing monstrosities, apparently this is not to be judged because this hasn't got a direct effect in your wallet, and this shows how bad they are. But we've already discussed this before. So yeah, I don't think the political landscape was ever so bad. In wherever you'd look, it's really, really bad. And Rucka usually says this is all comes down to epistemology. That's a bigger discussion, but I think you're right.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's morality, it's epistemology. I mean, it's about ethics, right? If individuals want a good life and they're willing to vote to protect that, then of course we see people voting to protect abortion rights because that it's part of planning your life long term. When I bring up epistemology, because we're talking about what's wrong with Trump, and the way I've come to see him, he is he represents a dispensing of reality. He inspires this sort of weird confidence with his supporters that says, like, you don't even need to think. Trust me, I know everything. I am the best businessman in the world. I know every world leader and I know how this runs. You don't just leave it all to me. And that to me is it's like we see the link between dispensing with reason and authoritarianism in one person personified. Justin with 199 says, Michael Knowles is the only Daily Wire member who backs Trump. You mean since the midterms? He's the only one that hasn't repudiated Trump, because like Ben Shapiro and I guess Matt Walsh and Clavin and Candace Owens have. Is that what you mean when you say he's the only one who backs Trump? You mean since the last couple of days?
I think Shapiro has been more consistent in seeing Trump as a problem.
Yes, but not nearly enough over the years. He definitely had to bite his tongue in recent times. And this is what we see. Like I said, Candace Owens finally starts to speak about what's wrong with Trump as soon as the midterms happen and it's time to support DeSantis. Suddenly now,
Oh, sorry.
she's willing
By
to
the way,
criticize.
here's another one who is worse than Trump. I would take Trump over Candace Owens anytime. She's worse than Trump.
Nobody's worse than Trump. Candace Owens, she gets canceled and she gets embarrassed and she half apologizes and she's shoots herself in the foot, and her audience, a lot of them can turn on her if she says the wrong thing. Donald Trump can do no wrong in the eyes of his audience, and that is a special type of problem. So in that sense, he is unique. No one else can do what Trump does. Like we can't even really compare him to other presidents. You know, we can't say, well, Bill Clinton, there's been nothing like him. And it's hard to imagine anyone else being able to pull off what he's done.
I mean, the left always has cults of personality, and they always create personality cults around their presidents. But this is certainly the first time, I think, since Lincoln, and with less cause, of course, that this has happened. And Reagan to some degree, but this does definitely have a mystical twist to it, unlike anything I've ever seen.
Listen, like I said, and Ali, the member, says the president who put Japanese Americans in camps is worse than Trump. A lot of presidents have done things worse than Trump has done, but there's never been an adult with prominence in society that behaves like Trump does and gets rewarded more for it.
And by the way, that very president, many historians and people on the left deify as one of the greatest presidents of all time. So
Roosevelt,
right? Yes, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, one of the worst presidents ever, is deified as being one of the greatest by the majority of the establishment out there.
Oh, yeah. The whole Roosevelt family should have been snuffed out when they got off the Mayflower. That is a joke. Please, nobody go back in time and commit political violence. But yeah, the Roosevelts, talk about a president that wouldn't leave office when his time was up. You know,
right.
What did he serve? Like, was he on his fourth term?
Fourth. He was on his fourth
when he died of natural causes. Well, I'll just say this. Go ahead.
He was a smoker and a drinker, and he had cancer, and he finally blew a nut in his head.
Mm-hmm. But look, at the end of the day, even someone like Roosevelt and other horrific presidents and other horrific politicians, they had to basically make their case to the public. They had to say, look, here's where we're at. Here's what I'm saying. And here's what, like, we get no intellectual process with Trump. He's just an absolute scum.
I disagree with you. I think, well, they had the pretense of making a case to the public, but they used the political apparatus that they were developing to pressure political conformity. I mean, there were enforcers in the street that forced you to go along with the National Recovery Act. If you were a business that didn't go along and didn't get the Blue Eagle in your window, you were persecuted. You were brought up before judges. You were vilified. You were put out of business.
America has some skeletons in its closet. Europe has bigger skeletons in their closet. And I'm saying the worst of all worlds for today is someone who is beholden to nothing and is not altered by any facts and could just ejaculate from his mind at any time, and the audience eats it up. That is a complete dispensation, if that's a word, of reality and of the rational process. And that to me is impossible to come back from once we go down that road. Marilyn with $2 says he was with his mistress when he died. Franklin Roosevelt. Well,
yes, I think he was. I think. Oh, yes, he did. Oh, yes, he did. His secretary. I think her name was Lucy Mercer, but somebody could correct me on that.
Mm-hmm. Robin, the member, says he already started up his time machine. It's hard to turn off again. Yeah, please, nobody. But that would be an interesting movie. You know, Terminators going back and like snuffing out historical figures. That would be cool.
Do we know many Democrat presidents without mistresses?
Or some a lot of Republicans.
Jimmy Carter didn't have a mistress.
Carter and Obama are probably the only ones that come to mind. So if LDR had one, then
LBJ, you mean?
Lyndon Johnson had one. JFK had definitely, we know who it was. Clinton, again, proven case. So it's only Carter who. Oh, sorry. Johnson didn't. Sorry, FDR had one, not Johnson. Sorry.
Johnson probably. I think Johnson was a bit of a philanderer. Any man who could take his penis out in a meeting probably has women on the side.
Took his penis out in a meeting.
He would do that. Yeah. He had a thing called the treatment where he'd lean into people's space. And
Yeah,
intimidate
I've heard
them.
about that.
I mean, put yourself in his shoes.
Right. Right.
It's,
I mean,
it's
I would do the same thing.
1975. You're in the middle. There's no internet yet. Nobody's going to know. You're the most powerful
Before
guy
that.
on earth. You let it go to your head.
In
Pardon
the
the pun.
60s. Yeah, definitely during a tumultuous time. 1968, things are going to hell. Take your penis out in a meeting. Why
Mhm.
not?
It's a long time ago. You still had slaves, former slaves walking around. Almost.
But I do notice that psychiatrists are very fond of psychoanalyzing Republicans, and they leave the rich fruit of the Democratic Party behind. And there's some great psychopathy there that we could pick apart.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, this is a long episode, which goes against my principle of 30 minutes max.
Well, your principle was not run by Mark and I, but it's a good principle. So let's try to wrap it up. I will say this. It's going to be fun for me. It is fun. It's going to be fun watching Republicans squirm and try to figure out what they're going to do next. There's going to be infighting. Trump is not going to go away easy, I strongly suspect. It's going to be like Game of Thrones season, whatever, the next 6, whatever comes next. And also, look at the way they're coping now. Look at the way Republicans are coping with this and the sort of level of soul searching that they're trying to become capable of versus how they handled 2020 election. And the difference is they no longer have Mr. QAnon as their figurehead. And that is why Trump needed to go. And that's why I hope he stays gone. That's the way I look at it.
Let's just hope the door doesn't hit him on the way out, or maybe it should. I'll kick the door shut on him.
We do not endorse anyone swinging a door at any political figures nor anyone. This is a philosophical battle. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. This was a fun and interesting episode. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk politics and electoral politics again soon. Coming up at 7 p.m. UK time, it's the Briefly Objective premiere with Harry Binswanger on Immanuel Kant's Crusade for Christianity. Wait, but I thought Kant was an Enlightenment philosopher who was anti-religion. Well, that's where you're wrong. And that's why philosophy matters. So subscribe to the Briefly Objective, link in the chat and in the description. Then at 10 p.m.
Is this the meme, that's where you're wrong, kiddo?
Maybe. I didn't even know it's a meme. It should be. It is now that I've done it. At 10 p.m. UK time, it's Life on Earth with Robert Nasser on presence and being present. Presence and being present.
Okay, side note, I was listening to someone talking about persuasion methods, and they were talking about what they call the DJ at radio at midnight voice. And the first voice that came to my mind was Robert Nasir. So, this calm, deep voice. So.
All right. Very good. Very good. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll be back for the Daily Objective. Good talking to you guys. Thursday Collective is what this was. And everyone have a wonderful Thursday. Oh, yeah. I made a comment the other day about how, like, I hate the evenings or something, no politics in the evening. That's like a rule I made for myself as we're broadcasting in the UK, and the channel is called UK, and it's evening there, and all the shows are at night. We support politics and philosophy in the evening. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Peace.